He found the mucus was a reliable sign of ovulation, and that couples who avoided sex around this time did not get pregnant. By 1964, 3 years after the pill was introduced in Australia, Dr John Billings had turned his research into a method.
The World Health Organisation wanted to put our name on it, but we thought it was a bit grandiose. They said, well, after all, this is the Billings Method.
The soil needs rain and moisture to be fertile. Something similar is true of a woman's body during the fertile phase of her monthly cycle, when she is aware of the presence of moisture.
The method was based on a radical idea that each woman could take charge of her own fertility.
Every woman during her fertile years can be easily taught to recognize this sensation and identify her fertile phase when this mucus secretion is present in her body.
After menstruation,
in most cycles, there are 2 infertile phases and 1 fertile phase.
Next, we have the start of the moist time, when it is possible for a seed to germinate. This is when women become potentially fertile.
When a woman feels a change in her mucus, it's a sign the fertile phase has begun.
Clear, slippery and lubricative was the peak day.
Another change in the mucus indicates the peak of fertility has passed.
during this time, without moisture, a woman cannot conceive.
But the method got a mixed reception.
There was a lot of opposition to it. It was the 60s, you know, a volatile time that was really. There were one group of people who accepted this because it empowered them. They were able to take charge of their own affairs. But then there was a group, largely a male group, who couldn't possibly hand over all this part of their power, I suppose, their control, to the women.
By now, Lyn Billings was working with her husband. As doctors, they knew they had to answer their critics with facts.
And it's a study which comes out of the University of Melbourne. It's headed by...
They recruited scientists to put the method to the test. Dr Henry Berger, a hormone specialist, was one.
In the year or two before final menses. Does that make sense?
The scientists measured women's hormones to pinpoint the time of ovulation. Then they compared their estimate of the time of ovulation with the women's. The results made scientific history.
I think what was striking to us was that women could actually so reliably identify when they were fertile. Here was somebody who'd listened to many women, deduced what symptoms indicated that they were fertile, and that we were able to validate, well, yes, he's absolutely correct.
Henry Berger and his wife Jenny were also testing the method at home.
We were married in '59. And we both wanted four or five children. That was agreed.
I think at that time I was a Catholic who was very committed to following the Church's teachings. The Church's teachings were very clear that artificial methods of birth control were unacceptable, were not morally correct, and every act of intercourse between a couple should be open to the possibility of transmission of life.
The Bergers are now grandparents. Back in the 60s, as a young couple, they wanted to space the arrival of their children. Jenny and Henry were using an early form of the method. Jenny had to take her temperature daily, as well as chart her mucus, and abstain from sex during fertile times.
I found abstinence difficult, she found abstinence difficult, and she found the artificiality of having to live one's love life by calendar as something which she found very difficult to deal with.
It wasn't easy, but I suppose we did learn to respond and be very sensitive to each other's needs. I mean, that was a good thing, but in a sense I disagreed with the approach. I thought this was a personal matter, not the church's matter, but we lived like that for 13 years.
By the late 60s, Australians had embraced the pill and were getting a taste of sexual freedom. But in 1968, Pope Paul VI spoiled the party with the papal encyclical Humane Vitae. To many Catholics' surprise, it reinforced the ban on all forms of artificial contraception. The Billings were ready and waiting.
And we had the answer. We said that there is no need for the pill, there's no need for contraception. This method will do it.
It's not easy to see newborn babies as a threat, but they are another weighty element in a dangerous equation. There are 8,000...
In the 60s, people around the world were alarmed by the population explosion and by food shortages in developing countries.
Or to put it another way, 75 million extra people make a claim on the Earth's resources every year.
Many people have therefore developed an obsessional drive to limit human fertility, to prevent conceptions and even to prevent births by any means at all which can be devised.
So too,
some aid programs promoted contraception, even sterilisation. But these were resisted by the Catholic Church and the Billings.
They were anti-population. They were in the developing countries and they were trying to control the numbers. So they were out to prevent conception, which was quite different from our attitude, where we believe people should have the information and make up their own minds.
And the couple will know that from the third day past this recognised peak.
By the 70s, the method had been simplified and international interest was growing.
She's now infertile.
The United Nations set up a 5-nation trial to test it in the field.
Well, I think men in general might feel...
It was run by Henry Berger, and it had mixed results.
For family planning in their own family units, presumably.
For those couples who followed the rules, the pregnancy rates were low. But many couples didn't follow the rules, and in this group pregnancy rates were high, around 20 in 100. The weakness in the method was not the science, but human nature.
The practical outcome of the application of the method is still that there is a significant pregnancy rate.
The Billings method gives you information. It in itself does nothing to either stop or to make conception happen. It's the actions of the people that actually make it happen.
That's an intrinsic part of the method, as far as I'm concerned, which does depend heavily on human behaviour and multiple factors in a couple's relationship.
This is Lego, Max. That's another kind of Lego. What else is in there? Is it blue?
Like many Catholics, the Bergers became disillusioned with the Church's position on contraception.
I ultimately became convinced that I couldn't continue to conscientiously follow that rule.
What's going on
After
there?
13 years and 5 children, they gave up on the Billings method.
He decided that using that method was not for us anymore.
Where did you go with Dave?
So we both were in agreement that I would go on the pill.
Celia's going to turn 3 tomorrow.
And you will very soon, Liv, won't you?
Yeah.
What date, Liv?
I think it is largely an outdated philosophy, and it's mainly, I think, people following Catholic moral teaching who will be committed and who will continue to need to use a method like that.
But the Billings had confidence in their method, and they were taking it to the world.
People thought this was a Catholic method, but of course it's a biological